January 14th, 1942, 3 M, so the port of Arkhangelsk, Soviet Union. The air is a physical weight. It is minus 42 degrees Celsius. To breathe is to feel 1,000 needles in your lungs. The Arctic twilight gives the sky a bruised, permanent purple glow. Major Alistair Hake, Royal Engineers, stands on the frozen quay of the Dvina River. His job is logistics. His job is to move tonnage, and right now, his tonnage is frozen solid. Behind him, the freighter SS Empire Gem, one of the survivors of Arctic convoy PQ-7, sits encased in ice. Her decks are piled with the priceless cargo that Stalin is screaming for. Wooden crates of 303 ammunition, shrink-wrapped Merlin engines for Hurricane fighters, and the silhouettes of 28-ton Matilda tanks, their steel hulls and tracks frozen to the very deck of the ship. The war, for Alistair Hake, is not a battle of bullets. It is a battle of frozen grease. This is not acceptable. Major. The voice is flat, guttural. Comrade Colonel Loginov, NKVD, is a short, broad man whose face is invisible behind a fur-lined hood. He is the Stavka representative. He points a mittened hand at Hake's logistics train. It's a line of 3-ton British-made Bedford OY trucks. They are ghosts. A group of desperate Soviet soldiers has built a bonfire under the oil pan of the lead truck. They are trying to liquefy the engine oil, which has the consistency of tar. The truck's canvas canopy, frozen brittle, shattered like glass hours ago. Its rubber tires are flat, solid blocks, frozen to the icy ground. My men die at Rzhev's, Major, Loginov says, his voice devoid of emotion. They are eating horses. They are given 10 bullets a day. You bring us statues. Hake is furious and hopeless. He knows the math, the railway line, the vital artery to the Eastern Front is 10 kilometers away. Between him and that railway is a road of packed snow, now buried under 6 feet of fresh powder. His trucks cannot start. His steam-powered cranes are frozen. Even the horses brought in to haul sleds are dying. Their lungs crystallize by the air. The entire Allied supply line to Russia, the lifeline of the Eastern Front, is choking to death right here, on this dock. The convoys, which have braved U-boats and Stuka dive bombers, have succeeded only in delivering a mountain of useless frozen steel to a frozen port. We are doing everything we can, Hake says, his words cracking in the cold. The engines. They are not designed for this. Loginov turns. He stomps through the snow to a forgotten corner of the quay, near a pile of frozen ropes. He kicks a large, snow-covered tarp. And this? Hake knows what's under it. He'd seen them on the manifest. 12 Bombardier B-12 enclosed snow tractors, a last-minute addition from the Canadian Army, listed under Arctic Specialist Equipment. Hake, a man of trucks and trains, had dismissed them. They were novelties. They looked like snub-nosed, bright yellow vans with a pair of steerable skis at the front and a set of rubber and steel tracks at the back. They were thin-skinned, unarmoured. They were toys. The quartermaster in London had mocked them as Quebec sleighs. It's a personnel carrier, Colonel, Hake says dismissively. It's for moving ski patrols, rescuing downed pilots. It can't move tonnage. It has an engine, Loginov says. Make it move! Hake sighs. He turns. Sergeant Kael. A figure detaches itself from the shadow of a crane. Sergeant Armand Kael, Royal Canadian Army Service Corps, a wiry, quiet man from Shawinigan, Quebec, who had been sent as the technical advisor for these machines. He, unlike the British, is not shivering. He is built for this. Sir, Kael says. The Colonel, Hake gestures, wants to see the sleigh work. Can you start it? Kael doesn't answer. He brushes the snow off the hood. He doesn't build a fire. He pulls a small blowtorch from his pack, opens a small access panel, and begins to expertly warm the engine block and the intake manifold. He knows this engine. It's a Ford Flathead V8, adapted by a man he knows back home, a mechanic named Joseph Armand Bombardier. Bombardier had invented this machine not for war, but for life. He'd invented it after his own son had died of appendicitis, because the snow was too deep to get to a hospital. He'd built it to carry doctors to sick children, to get priests to remote villages. It was a civilian vehicle, a snow bus, designed to conquer the Sacré Hiver, the sacred winter. Kyle finishes his work. He climbs into the cab, he pulls the choke, He hits the ignition. The Bedford truck is silent. The port is silent. The Bombardier B-12 coughs. It sputters. A cloud of white-blue smoke erupts from its exhaust. And then, with a deep, confident V-room, the V8 engine roars to life. Loginov and Hake both turn. Stunned. It is the only working engine in the entire port of Arkhangelsk. Kale guns the engine. The two rubber tracks, a patented sprocket and wheel system that Bombardier had spent a decade perfecting, bite into the snow. The toy lurches forward. It doesn't sink. It floats on top of the 6-foot drift, the skis planing, the tracks throwing up a massive rooster tail of white powder. It does a complete 360-degree turn and pulls up, its engine purring. Hake stares at the 12-passenger cab. He stares at the frozen 3-ton Bedford. He stares at the mountain of frozen medical supplies, plasma, sulfur drugs, bandages. He makes the decision that will change Arctic logistics. Sergeant Kyle, Hake orders, his voice sharp. Take that thing and get 6 men. Rip the passenger seats out of it. Now, Colonel, he says, turning to Loginov. My trucks can't move, but your medical supplies will be at the railway in 30 minutes. The Quebec novelty, the sleigh, has just become the only vehicle capable of saving the Arctic convoy lifeline. The plumbers had saved the roads in Italy. The bus drivers were about to save the supply lines in Russia. February 2nd, 1942, 11 m, the Arkhangelsk-Vologda railway line. Sergeant Armand Kale is no longer a technical advisor. He is the commander of an ad hoc, life-saving express service. He hasn't slept in 48 hours. His world has become a 10-kilometre stretch of frozen hell between the docks and the railway yard. His fleet consists of 8 Bombardier B-12s, their bright yellow paint now streaked with grime and diesel exhaust. The passenger seats were ripped out with crowbars. The carpeted floors of the civilian snow buses are now slick with blood plasma and grease. The B-12s are doing what the half-tracks, trucks, and horses could not. They are moving. Kale grits his teeth as his machine, loaded with crates of 50 caliber ammunition, crests a 10-foot snowdrift. The Ford V8 engine screams in a low gear, but it doesn't quit. The patented track and ski system, designed by Joseph Armand Bombardier to float on the soft, deep powder of rural Quebec, is proving to be the single most effective piece of technology in the entire port. While the Bedfords and ZIS-5 trucks sit frozen, their axles buried. The B-12s are running a constant shuttle. They are pulling 2-ton sleds, Wanagans, loaded with artillery shells. They are carrying wounded Soviet soldiers from the front, brought in by train, to the frozen hospital ships. They are, most critically, carrying the flight crews and high-value spare parts, magnetos, propellers, cockpit canopies, for the hurricanes that must be assembled to defend Murmansk. This is the Valcourt solution, a solution not from a military proving ground, but from a small-town garage in Valcourt, Quebec. Back in Valcourt, Joseph Armand Bombardier himself is in a state of frantic, patriotic production. When the war started, his small company, L'Autoneige Bombardier Limité, was building B-12s for doctors, school boards, and forestry companies. Then the Canadian Department of Munitions and Supply came calling. They didn't just want a snowmobile. They wanted specialized snowmobiles. Bombardier and his small team of engineers, men who were mechanics, not weapons designers, began adapting. They were asked for an ambulance. They took the B-12, painted it white, and designed fittings for 4 stretchers. They were asked for a troop carrier. They designed a heavier-duty B-12 model. They were asked for a cargo hauler. They created the B-18, a wider, more powerful version. They were even asked for an armoured snowmobile. They created the Mark II, reinforcing a B-12 chassis and adding an open-topped machine gun turret. These machines, over 150 of them, were now flowing into the Allied war effort, but they were peripheral. They were sent to air bases in Newfoundland to rescue downed pilots. They were used to patrol the coast of Labrador, until now, until Arkhangelsk, here in the frozen artery of the Eastern Front. Kale and his small team of Canadian mechanics are discovering, in real time, the genius and the flaws of their machines. The B-12 is a civilian vehicle. It's built for comfort. This is a problem. The rubber tracks, designed for logging roads, are being shredded by the shrapnel-littered, ice-crusted docks. The steering skis, designed to turn in soft snow, are buckling under the weight of towed ammunition sleds. In a makeshift garage, a converted fish-freezing warehouse, Kyle and a Soviet mechanic named Pyotr are performing battlefield surgery. They don't have spare parts from Valcourt. They have a wrecking yard of frozen Allied and Soviet equipment. The track pins are shearing, Kyle explains, holding up a broken steel pin. The rubber is too brittle. It can't take the torque. Pyotr, who has kept T-26 tanks running on vodka and prayer, nods. He disappears and returns with a box of track links from a destroyed T-70 light tank. They are all steel, too heavy, but the pins, they spend the night hammering, re-drilling, and swearing. By dawn, they have created a hybrid track, reinforcing Bombardier's rubber and canvas belt with Soviet-made steel grouses and pins. The Valcourt-Arkhangelsk pattern, the modified B-12, Moose, roars out of the shed. It is louder, it is rougher, but it grips the ice-slicked key like a bulldog. It now tows 3 sleds. Major Hake, watching from his office, finally understands. He is not looking at a Quebec sleigh. He is looking at the grandfather of the all-terrain vehicle. He is looking at the only thing that works. He sends an urgent, frantic cable to London, which is bucked to Ottawa. The message is simple. Convoy logistics failing, trucks useless, horse transport failed, only Canadian snow tractors operational, sending modification specs, require all available units and spares immediately. The toy has become the pivot point. But the Arctic War is not just in Russia. 6,000 kilometers to the west, another, even more secret war is being waged, and it is a war of speed. February 20th, 1942, Goose Bay, Labrador, Royal Canadian Air Force Station. Flying Officer Howie Scott, a 22-year-old pilot from Dauphin, Manitoba, stares at the teletype, a Mayday signal. A Lockheed Hudson patrol bomber, hunting U-boats, has gone down on the ice, 150 miles north, on the coast of the Labrador Sea. 3 years ago, those men were dead. A rescue by dog sled would take 2 weeks, if it was possible at all. A rescue by a ski plane is impossible in the 50-knot crosswind that is currently howling across the airfield. "Get the Penguin!" Scott shouts. He runs to the hangar. It's not a B-12. It's another Canadian oddity. A snowmobile, light Mark-winged, built by the small Ottawa firm of R.S. Morris. It is, essentially, a motorcycle chassis with a single ski at the front and a small track at the back. It's fast, light, and completely exposed. Scott pulls on his parka, goggles, and fur-lined helmet. He straddles the machine, its small engine sputtering to life. He and another rescuer, on a heavier B-12 ambulance, roar off into the whiteout. The B-12 provides the power and the shelter. Scott's Penguin is the scout. He rockets ahead, his single ski carving through the frozen landscape, reading the snowdrifts, scanning the horizon. 8 hours later, half frozen but alive, Scott finds the Hudson's fuselage are crumpled on the sea ice. 3 survivors huddle inside, burning the last of their maps to stay warm. The toy, the Quebec sleigh, the Penguin. This entire family of overlooked Canadian inventions is no longer a peripheral niche. It has become the only way to move, rescue, and fight in the vast, frozen theatres of the war. From Arkhangelsk to Labrador, the machines born in the mind of a small-town Quebec civilian are keeping the Allied supply lines from collapsing. One small, V8-powered shuttle at a time. The war for the Arctic is now a war of logistics, and Canada, the Great White North, is the only country that brought the right tools to the fight. June 7th, 1943, 22 Atu Island, Aleutian Islands, Alaska Territory. The fog is a cold, grey ocean. It doesn't just block the view, it soaks, chills, and disorients. Second Lieutenant Dave Miller, U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps, huddled behind a rock, can no longer feel his feet. This is not the snow he was trained for. This is Muskeg. His world is a vertical, god-forsaken swamp, a landscape of volcanic rock, icy mud, and knee-deep water covered by a treacherous carpet of moss. The Japanese, dug into the high ground, are invisible, masters of this white hell. Miller's job is to supply the 7th Infantry Division as it claws its way up Massacre Valley, and his supply line is collapsing. "Damn it, push!" he screams, his voice hoarse. A dozen exhausted, soaking wet GIs are trying to drag a 75 Bernini pack howitzer, broken down onto sleds, through a knee-deep slurry of mud and ice. They are sinking. The sleds are sinking. A jeep, sent up the trail, lies 500 yards back, its axles snapped, its frame buried to the chassis. The mules, brought in for mountain warfare, are dying, their legs broken in the hidden crevices of the tundra. The men are freezing to death. They are developing trench foot and immersion foot in June. They are being picked off by Japanese snipers they cannot see. They cannot get the big guns or the artillery up the ridges. Without artillery, the infantry cannot advance. Without the advance, the Japanese win. "It's no good, sir," a corporal gasps, collapsing into the muck. "We can't move. It—" Miller stares at the gun. He's defeated, not by the Japanese, but by mud. From the fog below, a new sound emerges. Not the whine of a jeep or the growl of a GMC truck. It is a lower, rhythmic chug, 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 accompanied by the high-pitched squeak of tracks. A vehicle appears, looking like nothing Miller has ever seen. It's a snub-nosed, enclosed cab on tracks, painted white. It isn't sinking. It is floating on top of the muskeg, its wide rubber tracks distributing the weight perfectly. The front skis planing over the mud. It pulls up. A man in a parka steps out. He is not American. He is a captain in the Canadian Army, a liaison officer with the 1st Special Service Force, which is training for a similar operation on the nearby island of Kiska. The Canadian, a man named Gagnon, looks at the struggling GIs. He looks at the mired down howitzer. He doesn't say a word. He just points at the vehicle. "C'est un B-12, he says, from Valcourt. He and his driver attach a tow rope from the bombardier's rear pintle hook to the sled. "Get in," Gagnon says to Miller. Miller, dumbfounded, climbs into the warm cab. The Canadian driver shifts the V8 into its lowest gear. The engine grunts. The tracks bite. The sled, loaded with a half-ton of steel artillery, does not budge. The B-12's tracks spin, digging into the moss. "It's not working," Miller says, his last hope fading. "Non," Gagnon says. He gets out. He and his driver unroll a large canvas mat, a fascine, and lay it in front of the tracks for purchase. They adjust the load. They try again. The engine roars. The tracks find purchase, and the 75mm howitzer moves. The B-12, the Quebec sleigh, begins to crawl, steadily, up the impossible ridge, dragging the gun behind it. It moves at 3 miles an hour. It is the fastest thing on the island. The GIs stare, then break into a ragged, disbelieving cheer for the rest of the brutal 19-day battle for Attu, and the subsequent phantom invasion of Kiska. The tiny fleet of Canadian-built snowmobiles becomes the only functioning transport. They are no longer snow buses. They are prime movers. They are all-terrain tractors. They haul ammunition to the front. They haul mortars. Most importantly, they haul the wounded. Before the B-12s, a wounded man on the ridge faced an 8-hour, agonizing hand carry by stretcher-bearers, if he was lucky. Most froze to death or died of shock. Now, the B-12. Ambulances, with their heaters running, can get a man from the high ground to the field hospital in 30 minutes. They save hundreds of lives. The peripheral niche has become a critical capability. The US Army, the most powerfully industrialized force on Earth, has been logistically paralyzed by terrain their jeeps and trucks were never designed for. The solution came from a Canadian civilian mechanic who simply wanted to get his sick child to the hospital. And while Miller's battle is being fought on a tactical scale, a strategic battle of logistics is being waged just inland, on the Canadian mainland. A project so vast it is second only to the Panama Canal. It is the construction of the Alaska Highway, Alcan, and the Canal Pipeline. These are the vital 1,500-mile-long arteries designed to feed the air bases and armies defending Alaska from Japanese invasion, and they must be built now through a wilderness of subarctic forest, mountain ranges, and endless, just soul-destroying muskets. The US Army Corps of Engineers arrives with 10,000 men and the heaviest equipment on Earth. Caterpillar D8 bulldozers, 10-ton trucks, and massive earth movers. And in the winter of 1942-43, the entire project grinds to a halt. The machines, designed for dirt and rock, cannot function. The steel tracks of the bulldozers freeze solid. The trucks sink into the unfrozen muskeg hidden beneath the snow. The men are cut off, their supply lines stretching hundreds of miles, broken by impassable snowdrifts. The entire Alcan Highway, the road to Victory bus, is in danger of collapsing. The call goes out. not for more bulldozers, not for more trucks. The call goes out to Joseph Armand Bombardier in Valcourt, Quebec. The US Army doesn't order a dozen, they order hundreds. The B-12 and its heavier-duty cousins, the C-18s, are loaded onto flat cars and rushed west. They are not an ancillary support. They are the lead vehicles. They become the scouts, punching through 20-foot drifts to survey the route. They become the personnel carriers, moving the engineers and survey crews. They become the supply line, hauling fuel, dynamite, and rations to the isolated construction camps, keeping the men alive and the bulldozers fueled. The radio kids had kept the sea lanes open. The plumbers had kept the roads in Italy closed. Now, the bus drivers from Quebec are keeping the most important strategic highway of the Northern War open. They are succeeding where the most powerful military-industrial complex in the world had failed. The sleigh has become the unglamorous or overlooked, an absolutely essential workhorse of the entire North American theatre. December 20th, 1944, 16 was hours. The Ardennes forest, near Bastogne, Belgium. The snow is not a gentle powder. It is a relentless, suffocating force, driven by a 40-knot wind. It is piling into 10-foot drifts, burying the narrow, winding roads of the Ardennes. For the men of the UAS, 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles, the world has shrunk to the size of a frozen foxhole. They are surrounded. The Panzer Grenadiers of the 5th Panzer Army are everywhere. This is the Battle of the Bulge. And the American Army, the most mobile, mechanized army in human history, is paralyzed. The 2.5-ton deuce-and-a-half trucks are spun out, abandoned in ditches. The jeeps, the iconic workhorses of the war, are useless, their wheels spinning helplessly in the deep drifts. Even the M4 Sherman tanks are roadbound, their narrow tracks unable to get traction, making them easy prey for German 88s. The 101st is cut off. They have ammunition for perhaps 2 days. Their field hospitals are overflowing, and the wounded are freezing to death in their stretchers. The entire Allied counter-offensive is in danger of collapsing, not from German panzers, but from snow. At a corps-level command post 30 miles west, General Patton is famously apoplectic. He wants to move. He cannot. Get me. Anything. That moves in this, he roars. The call goes out, and the answer that comes back is not a new tank or a bigger truck. It is a small yet strange-looking vehicle that most GIs have never seen before. It is the M29 Weasel. The Weasel is a 4,500-pound, tin-skinned box with wide, 20-inch tracks. It has no armor, it has no gun, it looks like a bathtub on treads, and it is the most important vehicle in the Ardennes. It is also, in its DNA, a Canadian snowmobile, after the US. Army saw what Bombardier's B-12s and C-18s did in the Aleutians and on the Alcan Highway, after they watched this Quebec sleigh float over terrain that paralyzed their own heavy equipment. They realized their entire logistics doctrine was wrong. They had nothing for this kind of war. They didn't just buy Bombardier's machines. They learned from them. The USAS, military, in partnership with Studebaker, began a crash program to build a dedicated military over-snow vehicle. They studied Bombardier's patented sprocket and wheel track system, his low ground pressure design, his flotation principle. The M29 Weasel was the result. It was the American-built, militarized, mass-produced grandchild of Joseph Armand Bombardier's civilian snowbus. Now in the Ardennes, these heirs of Valcourt are thrown into the fight. A young private from the 82nd Airborne, his feet half frozen, is handed the keys to a Weasel. He has never driven one. Just pointed at the trees. Son, his sergeant says. It don't need a road. The private hits the gas. The Weasel, its wide tracks distributing its weight to less than 2 pounds per square inch, less than a marching soldier, does not sink. It climbs the 10-foot snowdrift, floats over it, and disappears into the forest. For the next week, the Weasels become the only functioning supply line. They are the new ambulances. They drive off-road, through the forests, right up to the frontline foxholes, pulling wounded men from the snow and shuttling them back. Their small engines the only sound of hope in the frozen woods. They are the new signal corps. They lay thousands of miles of telephone wire, reconnecting the cut-off companies, their light weight allowing them to cross frozen rivers the Germans know are impassable. They are the new quartermasters. They shuttle the three things keeping the 101st alive: ammunition, K-rations, and plasma. While the Panzers are stuck on the main roads, the Weasels are creating a new, invisible network of supply lines through the impassable forest. The peripheral niche has just become the critical logistic linchpin for the largest battle on the Western Front. The lessons learned in the ice of Arkhangelsk and the muskeg of the Aleutians are now being paid forward. The Canadian-built bombardiers, still in service, are simultaneously performing the exact same miracles in the forgotten Italian mountain campaign, hauling supplies for the 1st Canadian Division in the Apennine winter. The war is won, the great armies of the world stand down, and in the cold light of the post-war era, military logisticians from every major power, the US, Britain, the Soviet Union, all come to the same, belated conclusion. Their entire multi-billion-dollar arsenal of trucks, tanks, and half-tracks is useless in 40% of the world's terrain. It is useless in snow, in muskeg, in tundra, and in swamp. They all need a weasel, they all need a bombardier, the toy, the Quebec sleigh, the novelty invented by a small-town civilian to get a doctor to his dying son, has done more than just save a few convoys or rescue a few pilots. It has forced the world's great armies to completely rewrite their doctrine. It has created an entirely new category of military vehicle, the all-terrain, over snow, low-ground pressure tractor, from the B-12 to the M29 Weasel, to the modern-day Hägglunds and BR-270s. Every go-anywhere military vehicle of the next 75 years owes its existence to that garage in Valcourt. The Allied logisticians, who expected total collapse in the Arctic, were saved because one Canadian company already knew how to beat the Secret Hiver